Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's not very often when you meet someone who's built a business in 6 years from 1 million in turnover all the way to 20 million in turnover. Chances are when you've been to a masjid, you've seen an itar stall outside. And chances are that you and I both have itars at home, but not many people have taken a business from those humble beginnings all the way to a store in 33 different locations across 5 different countries across the world. Abid, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
My honor, thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure. And yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Abid, I'm going to dive straight in. What was it like? Because one of our team, Kazi, I think he's known you for a long time, and he was saying that, at the start, the business was you guys selling stuff out of the back of a van. What was it like, in those early days, and how did it kind of start, and how did it feel like? Because I think sometimes people look down on those kind of, scrappy businesses. What was it all like?
For us, I guess, we started off selling at the back of the van. We weren't really involved in business prior to that. We were really passionate about fragrances. My second brother, he kind of put together a small collection of fragrances, and we thought, we really want to start this business. Obviously, we don't have any capital to sort of, invest in a store or anything like that. So the only thing that we could do is actually take it to the streets of East London, and that's what we did. And we were perfectly happy to do that. We always had that hunger in us, and I think one of the first ones we did was actually just behind, just near East London Mosque.
All great stories.
Yeah.
Did your brother come up with your own brand of itar at the time, or was it like, were you wholesale? How does it work?
So he's studying in Egypt, and there's markets that basically sell wholesale of fragrances, and you can pick out different fragrances, different scents, and what we'd do is we'd either pick some of those fragrances or mix some of those fragrances ourselves. And so we did that. So we had a small collection of about 15 fragrances, and we imported that over from Egypt. And started from there, really.
Talk to us about how many hours would this take up in your day? Understand the visual. Like, would you just be parking your van up and how did it work?
Yeah. So well, obviously we used to store this stuff in our house basically, and when it came to sort of presenting it and stuff, we literally had to make use of all the resources that we had. So we'd sort of make our own trays, decorate it in velvet, and we'd have that prepped up in a little tray, and we'd have all the bottles in that tray, and all we'd do is basically take that tray, put it into the van, and if there was an event going on, or if there was something that was happening with a lot of people, we'd just literally turn up with the van, open it up, and basically start handing our samples out, and something that we do till this day as well in terms of handing the samples out. But yeah, it'd be a part-time thing. It would be sort of on the weekends or on the evenings. It'd be a few hours a week, really.
And when did it become more serious?
It was actually my third brother Shafiq. He actually got made redundant from his job at the time. He used to work at the city airport.
So your brother Shafiq, he got made redundant, and then he had time.
Yeah, and that's when we thought, okay, fine, he's got the time, and he wants to kind of push this forward. Before it was kind of like a side hustle, and now we wanted to do it as a full-time thing. And that's when we actually started doing market stalls. So we used to be in Whitechapel Market, like 7 days a week, basically.
Full time?
Yeah, full time. Wow. And that's where it all really started, that journey.
And when you say we, who was involved with that?
So it was basically me and my brothers, so 3 of us mainly, that used to go out to the market stalls. Towards, I guess, a few months in, we actually had 1 or 2 employees for the market stalls, but initially it was just the brothers. And occasionally my mum would come and sort of look after the stall while we went to Jummah. And my dad used to come as well. But yeah, it was basically us brothers, pretty much.
I don't really have retail experience, which is maybe one thing I'm missing. But I did dawah tables, which is
wow, nice.
At times it can be quite a thankless job.
Where was this?
This was up in the northeast.
Oh, okay.
But when the weather's terrible, when it's cold, and there's no one there, and you're like sat there, slightly wet.
We've got a few videos of literally hailstones coming down.
Oh my God.
And like literally thundering and raining, and we're there with our stand, still there. But I think as a market stall trader, it's something that you got to get used to. You know that some days are going to be very cold. It's going to be rainy. It could be snowing even, and you've got to be mentally prepared for that. And it is very tough. I'm not going to lie. Some days where you have to wake up, 7:30 in the morning, go and set up the stall, and you're thinking it's very, very cold, and you got to, take everything out of the van, put it in the stall, do all of that. At the end of the day, pack it back up, put it back in the van. That's a lot of graft. That's a lot of hard work. So at times it did get really sort of tiring. But actually, our mum is very sort of determined, and she's very disciplined. She used to always push us and say, no, don't think about sort of slacking or taking a day off. Continue, persevere, and keep that persistency going. So alhamdulillah, we used to sort of turn up, come rain or sunshine. But eventually we did kind of sort of realize that, okay, it's funny, I remember, because our perfumes actually started crystallizing because of how cold it was, and we were like, wow, this is not going to work. So that's actually when we sort of pivoted, and we thought, you know what, we need to go somewhere a little bit warmer. And so we explored shopping centers, because one of the things that we always had the vision of is selling this perfume and this attar to the masses. So even in the market store, you'd have a lot of people walking by, and we'd approach all types of people, and we had all types of customers. And so we wanted to kind of keep that going. So we thought shopping centre is a good location. So we actually, our first one was Ilford Exchange. We got a little RMU stand there, and that's when we moved out of the market stores into shopping centres, where it was a bit warmer.
And you've never been back? That was kind of the entry into shopping centres?
that was, we experienced it, we liked it, and there was a real buzz. And actually, the time that we went in, I remember it was around this time, November, just before sort of the Christmas trade. And obviously shopping centres get really busy around that time. And yeah, it was phenomenal. I mean, we really did well, and yeah, we never looked back.
And how much of your customers are Muslims and how much are not Muslims?
Actually, more than 50% of our customers are not Muslim now.
Wow.
Obviously, we started off, when we started out, it was predominantly probably 90% Muslim. But I think that's as a result of all the locations that we have, the demographics that we serve, our sort of approach to marketing and branding. Of course, at the end of the day, it is perfume. It's accessible by everyone. It's not, particularly for Muslims, although it's very common and liked in Muslim culture and Middle Eastern sort of cultures. So yeah, we've kind of broken that sort of market out, and we serve quite a diverse audience now.
Were there any haters back then?
There was always haters, to be honest. I remember even I was sort of just finishing school when the venture started, and when we started, people used to see attar as a sort of very traditional thing that only the elder generation wear. You might go to Hajj or Umrah and you buy that and you come back, and that was seen as that sort of thing. And when we started trying to sort of brand that and market that as a product that's sort of accessible by everyone, and people would kind of say, oh, who'd buy that? That's not really fashionable to wear that. Obviously, people would wear designer fragrances and brands, and we were always sort of trying to appeal to a slightly younger demographic. And so, yeah, we'd get comments, even in the markets, like, oh, is this from Hajj? Is this from Umrah? That kind of, that mindset that it's only kind of limited to that. But yeah, I mean, we never really took notice of it. I mean, we just kind of carried on doing our thing.
And your family, are you from a family of entrepreneurs, or was there any pressure on you to get a real job, quote unquote?
Not necessarily. I think, my sort of parents were quite open. I obviously come from quite a religious, conservative family. I think the priority and the focus was more on sort of Islamic studies, making sure that we went to madrasa and things like that. So I did that. I mean, all of us did that. In terms of career, there wasn't a sort of strict guideline as to, you need to become this or etc. So I was always sort of interested in creative, in branding, in marketing, in video editing. So I used to do that in my free time when I was quite young. And so I kind of used those skills to help out in the early days. For example, I designed the first logo, helped build the first website, and create some of the sort of marketing material and the videos. So we kind of jumped straight into it. My brothers sort of had a few jobs before that, tried a few things. Tried a couple of businesses, but this was the first business that we did together as a family, with our brothers. And
is it still, like, all of you are still together, or is it?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, yeah. We're still together, 5 brothers, and still a family-owned business.
And so I want to jump forward to now you're in Ilford Exchange. Are you the CEO yet? When did you become the CEO?
So I'm sort of assisting my brother, Shafiq, who was sort of running the show at the time. He was sort of, kind of heading up the startup phase of this business and really going through all the challenges that we faced in those days. I was sort of, again, assisting operationally, both selling, but also in terms of branding, marketing, those sort of responsibilities I was doing at the time.
And what was like what was that big move where you went from, because you see small businesses in the middle of those aisles in shopping centres, and most of them, they don't get anywhere. They either stay there or they die. What was the thing that moved you, or what were the things that moved you from there into a shop, into another shop?
I think we always had a vision that if we are going to do this, we want to sort of take it quite far. And I think that's the key thing here, and that's the most important thing, having the vision to actually do it. Because if you don't have the vision, then you're not going to sort of move in that direction and do the things that will take you towards that direction. But I think we had a few opportunities. For example, opening in Westfield Stratford, one of the largest, the busiest shopping centres in the UK at the time. We kind of identified that opportunity and we went in there. And that gave us, I guess, an advantage in the sense that we were one of the first businesses to be in a shopping centre like that and selling the products that we were.
Was it a risk?
Of course, yeah, 100%. At the time, financially, we couldn't afford to be there in that sense, sort of fitting the place out. You had to build a massive kiosk, which is like 8 meters by 3 meters. And to build those things with a proper contractor, even back then, it wasn't cheap. And so, yeah, it was a big risk for us. But
how did you afford it?
We had to sort of lean into, family and friends and say, give us a little short-term loan and of course Hasana basically. But also obviously we'd saved up a lot of the profits that we made from the market stalls and all the things, all the activities that we did, and sort of invested in that. And the last push was to kind of ask for help.
So that was so Ilford Exchange shut down.
Yeah.
And you've moved fully into Stratford now.
Yep.
And you're still in the middle?
Yeah. So we still have that. It's in Westfield Stratford. It's still there. It's actually still one of our busiest, alhamdulillah, it's one of our busiest locations. And from there, we kind of continued to sort of grow that. We opened our store in Whitechapel, just opposite the Sunnamusk in the corner. You might have seen it. And then from there, we did a few more. And I guess between the years of sort of 2011 and 2017, we opened a few locations, but it was very slow growth. As you know, growing a business without any growth capital, significant debt or anything like that, it's really hard. And so we were sort of going through the usual challenges of any small business's cash flow, trying to manage all of that, trying to grow at the same time, trying to invest in new product at the same time. So those years were quite challenging.
And did you ever have to shut down any sites?
Out of all the ones that we opened, very few, but yeah, there were occasions that we did pull out of a few locations because sometimes the actual location might not be right. Sometimes the shopping centre might not be right. But like I said, it's very few. I could probably count from the top of my head. It's probably 2 or 3 over the entire 15 years.
Yeah. And when did you step into the role?
So I stepped in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. So before that, like I said, I was kind of getting a lot of experience working within the business, and then my brother got involved in a few other businesses, and that was a time where I thought, I could take the responsibility on, and I wanted to. I was very passionate.
When you took over, what was the turnover?
It's about $1 million.
Okay. And so you've obviously been on this like big growth journey since then. Mm-hmm. What were I guess the key moves that you feel like in retrospect, looking back over the last 6 years, what was it that helped really unlock some of this?
I'd say sort of relationship building was a key part of this. In the world that we operate in, shopping centres, sort of retail space, it's about who you know in terms of, getting the right space, getting the right deals. And I think from very early on, we sort of maintained very good relationships with the people that we worked with. And so when COVID came around, businesses were struggling quite a lot, especially retail businesses. And I think one of the biggest opportunities that we sort of capitalized on was that period where shopping centers were looking for retailers. And we did quite a few good deals at the time. And that helped us really sort of accelerate that growth. So yeah, I'd say, you know, some of the relationships that we've built over the years, and waiting for the right moment and the right time and sort of executing. And that's kind of what we did. Alhamdulillah, you know, like I said, you know, we'd kind of saved up quite a bit of capital in terms of from profits. Yeah. And when the time was right, we just could have invested that into the growth.
And so the vibe that you get from Sunnamusk is very much, or more, the vibe that you would get from like a mainstream perfume brand. How did you kind of make that transition over as a brand, and you know, what's like, I guess, the experience like for the customer?
Yeah. One of the things that we've always focused on quite a bit was customer service, in terms of how we approach our customer, how we deal with the customer, what the impression that is left behind after they've left. And so we take a lot of pride in that, in sort of delivering really good customer service. But I think in terms of, you know, that feel that that impression that you get, you know, that's kind of been years of work behind the scenes. And that's investing in the right talent to produce the right sort of content. I mean, you'd know this, you do this a lot, but very, very early on, sort of because of my passion for branding and marketing, you know, I'd always have high expectations in terms of what we produce, whether that was marketing, branding, advertising. And so very, very early on, I think in 2017, we produced our first TVC. And for that time, we invested a huge amount of money. I think it was around 15K into producing one video. And that was produced by a director. You know, a lot of effort went into it. It was shot in Cape Town. Yeah. And so these are the things that were quite different about us, I guess, compared to other people that were trying to do it.
Was it worth it?
100%. 100%. I mean, at the time, if you looked at it financially, anyone would say, why would you do that? You know, it doesn't make sense. You're a small business, you're investing 15K into a video. I mean, that doesn't really make sense. But it was the vision that I had in terms of positioning ourselves as one of those sort of brands that people aspire not only to buy from, but to sort of be as well. And that video lives on. I mean, to this day, it's a well-produced video that we can use. I think it's those things that give that impression to people that, okay, these guys definitely take their brand seriously and invest behind the brand. And I think that's definitely one of the point of differences for us.
And if you, let's say a customer steps into the store, or possibly the experience of the customer starts even before he or she has stepped into the store. Is it mainly he's or she's?
More she's than he's, but it's kind of an even split pretty much.
So let's say she's wandered past, she's in Stratford, she's wandered past. Talk us through how you think about that customer experience from all the way from, you know, first awareness all the way to purchase, but then also possibly after purchase.
Yeah, I think, like I said, you know, all of our sort of team members are trained to sort of really give a good impression from start to finish. So we'd sort of greet the customer with a big smile, you know, approach them in a very friendly manner, be approachable but not sort of overly aggressive, because there's a fine balance between pissing people off basically and sort of approaching them. So we try and sort of maintain that balance. But, you know, we'd have a conversation with our customers. It's all about a conversation. You know, these samples that we hand out, it's a conversation starter. You know, we'd speak to the customer, we'd ask them about their day, we'd build that rapport, and from there we'd go on to kind of show them some of our best products, some of our best fragrances. And to be frankly honest, you know, our products do the talking for themselves. You know, there's not a lot of selling that we have to do. You know, some of those key fragrances that we hand out, most people sort of decide just by smelling the fragrance and say, you know what, this is actually really nice. And when we kind of explain to them that, you know, we're a Arabian inspired brand that sort of focuses on oil-based fragrances that are highly concentrated, that kind of does the selling. And then from that point on, it's all about the experience in terms of the packaging, the bag that they receive. You know, the little, you know, final touch where we, spray their bags and give them that sort of send off. It's all of those things that people remember. And I'm quite proud of the fact that, you know, if you look at our reviews, you know, people always say good things, both about the product and about the customer service. So I think, both kind of play a really, really crucial role in that customer experience. If you don't have a good product, you know, no matter how good your customer service is, you know, people are not going to be happy. And even if you do sort of entice them with good branding and good advertising, good marketing, they're going to buy it and they're going to go away and they're going to, that word of mouth element won't be there. But we have the product and then we have the customer service as well. So it's going to kind of complement each other. Yeah.
And on the product side, how has that evolved in terms of the development R&D on that over the years? Because I think initially you probably started off, I don't know, in an ether bottle or something.
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, we are now sort of investing into our own bottling, our own tooling, our own sort of design teams that come up with these concepts. Whereas initially, obviously, we'd buy the bottles and sort of procure them and then sell them on. We've gone very far with that. But also on the fragrance side itself, with 15 years of experience comes a lot of knowledge. When we started out, I wouldn't say we were as knowledgeable as we are today. So when we sort of brief our perfumers now, we do that with experience. What the brand values are, and we go through a lot of iterations of that development. Whereas initially that would have been slightly less. But now we might get a submission from one of the perfumers and we'd sort of turn that 8, 9, 10 times before we get to a position where we're actually happy with the fragrance and the product itself. So yeah, we've become a lot more particular in our development and our choice as well. And
it's a luxury product, this, right?
Yeah. We position ourselves as accessible luxury. So we're not sort of £300, £400, £500, but we're definitely not cheap either. So we fall within that sort of entry point of £70 for 100ml fragrance, all the way up to £160 for 100ml fragrance. And we're going to be launching a private collection as well, which will be at the higher end, which will be at the luxury end.
And with luxury, my sense is that these things, the actual, if you boil it down, it doesn't cost very much, right? Sunnamusk or Hugo Boss or whatever brand, the liquids themselves, I don't know, how much do they cost?
It depends.
Obviously it depends.
Yeah, it depends, yeah. I see what you're trying to say in terms of the actual cost of the actual material. Sometimes relative to the price isn't as much. But I think in terms of luxury, it's about the experience, it's about the knowledge, it's about knowing what to use and how to use it. And actually you'd be surprised, some of the ingredients are pretty expensive. I mean, if you use oud in your fragrance, if you use sort of real natural ingredients, they can get really, really expensive. Obviously you got fragrance at the mass end of the market. Yes, absolutely. There are very sort of cheap materials that you can use. But actually, genuinely, we try and use pretty expensive stuff in our fragrances, and we try and use a blend of natural ingredients and sort of ingredients that have been sort of upcycled. There's a lot of new technology in the fragrance world. I don't want to sort of bore you with that, but you'd be surprised, how much effort goes into buying high quality glass, for example. There's grade C, grade B, grade A glass. You'd want to go for grade A. There's a lot more, although the actual glass might not be expensive. Where it gets expensive is, for example, there might be blemishes on the glass. And on a grade A glass, you'd reject probably 50% of that glass. And that's where it gets expensive. It's because the quality control is so high, you can't accept sort of grade B ingredients or materials. And that's where I think sort of luxury brands quite well. And that's where they differ. It's that point of difference.
Yeah, and I'm not asking it from a critical perspective. I'm kind of asking it to understand it from a scientific business perspective. That these are relatively high margin products, and the thing that allows an entrepreneur to demand a higher margin is that's kind of what I'm trying to understand. And I guess at the heart of it, it's quality, it's the customer service, it's the branding, and arguably, I was having a discussion why do people, pay a lot of money for certain things like certain high-end chocolates or perfumes or alcohol or even things like flowers. Yeah. It's not necessarily because of the unit economics of it, it's because it has meaning imbued within it, like some kind of gifting aspect. I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well, in terms of what is the role that perfumes play in your customers' lives?
Absolutely. I think there's a whole emotional part to this as well, and there's that brand experience that I guess luxury brands provide. It's also about brand perception. It's how do other people perceive you as a result of using a brand, and it's the build up to that. Whether that's the branding, the marketing, the positioning, the ambassadors that you use. I think people buy into that quite a lot as well. It's all about how does that make you feel, and as a result, also how do others perceive you. So I think there is a sort of a massive part of branding and marketing to luxury brands. But also I think, there is an emotional element to obviously connection, loyalty. Some of the people have been buying from Sunnamusk for a number of years, and they've kind of seen that journey. They've grown with the brand. Fragrances play a big part to people's lives. It's a massive memory. If I was to gift you a fragrance for a very particular time, that might be your wedding or anniversary. You definitely remember that because there's certain things that give us very distinct memories, and I'd say fragrance is definitely one of them.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
no, I think it does. It needs to have, in order for it to play the function that it is supposed to in a customer's life, it needs to have a certain value associated with it. But then that value doesn't maintain itself over the long term unless you buttress it with the quality of the product, the branding, the marketing, the customer service, and the long-term investment in that as well. Because I think, if you think about Sunnamusk, the long-term investment into the advertising and the marketing and the branding is what it feeds into the point that you were saying about how customer perceives themselves as wearing that brand. It's that kind of that allegiance 100%. To that brand.
Yeah, and I think also brands that are experience or luxury, in a way they have a responsibility to push the boundaries a little bit more than sort of startups and other brands. You got to be showing your customers that developing and launching things that are ahead of the curve. And I think that's where people sort of gain respect for brands as well, is when they actually deliver things that weren't expected, that they didn't sort of anticipate. So it's all those little things that definitely add to the value of the brand.
And so Abid, going back to now, you're in the hot seat. Was there any moment over the last 6 years where you've just felt like you're way out of your depth and just don't have the skill set to deal with?
Yeah, definitely. I think you do get that sort of imposter syndrome from time to time. As you scale the brand and as you grow the brand, you sort of put into different scenarios and
give us one.
I mean, there's been times where, you're networking or you're in an event where, there's a high level of caliber in terms of guests and people that you're sort of trying to network with. And as a young person that's sort of trying to grow into that role and manage a slightly larger business, you sometimes feel out of place. You sometimes feel insecure. Like, am I supposed to be here? Am I good enough? You do get those things, but I think, you got to kind of fight through that. And being an imposter sometimes helps, growing your skills. And I've found that, throwing myself in the deep end has only done me benefit in terms of leveling my skills up. And so that
so
does happen.
How do you deal with that then? So obviously you've walked into a room where, I don't know, they're all probably white and middle class and a lot older than you are. I don't know, representing very established businesses, possibly looking down on you as like this young upstart, as like, where's he come from? What does he know?
Yeah.
What are the practical ways that you navigate that then?
I think it's all about being able to have a conversation and building a rapport. And I think, I've been pretty good at that in terms of relationship building through my experience.
So you said I'm obviously been experienced.
Yeah, I've obviously kind of been exposed to talking to people, building relationships, whether that's customers, trade partners, whoever else it might be. And I think it's transferring those skills to be able to have certain conversations and also pushing yourselves to learn more. So for example, if I'm going to an event and I know there's going to be X, Y, and Z there, it's about educating yourself as well before that and trying to learn, be able to have a conversation, be able to have those conversations starting points. And learn from people. There's no harm in learning from people. There's no harm in asking questions. And I would never sort of pretend like I know everything. If there is something that I can learn from someone, then I'd ask them questions and I'd be very curious. And people, I guess, in a way respect that and they see this young person that's quite aspirational, that wants to do this sort of and grow this business. A lot of the time they actually end up respecting you quite a bit because they see you with a person that's got hunger, that's got drive, and that's got a vision. And so you kind of spin it in that way. You kind of inspire them in a different way.
Were there any times over the last several years where you were dealing with potentially catastrophic risks, where this could actually end the business?
Yeah, many times.
And how do you do that? Give us an example. And how do you do that?
Like I said, we've had situations where, you're trying to grow the business, so you commit to something. For example, you commit to purchasing something, or you commit to opening a certain store or a kiosk, but actually you don't have the funding in place. So at that point, you've either got to sort of move funds around, or you've got to, ask for favors. And there's been those sort of pinch moments where you need to make a payment, or you need to commit to something, you need to open a store in the next few weeks, but not everything's going to plan. And you've got to really get out of your comfort zone and start making those phone calls. Really? And sometimes not nice, you don't want to do that. But as a business person, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you've got to do things, that are really outside your comfort zone, and sometimes you have to ask people for favors. And sometimes people are very shy and they don't want to ask people favors. But those favors, really, really saved our lives at some points of the business. So for me, it's all about being very solution orientated, thinking quick on your feet, and making those phone calls, because you have a very limited time period, and if you don't take quick, decisive actions, that could be the end of it. And I'm sure many other entrepreneurs can relate, and I'm sure you can probably relate to some of those instances.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Where do you see the fragrance industry headed, and how does Sunnamusk navigate these waters?
Yeah, I think fragrance is growing. There's definitely a sort of interest in premium fragrances and in luxury fragrances, and you can see that with the younger generations, the Gen Zs, Gen Alphas. They very much appreciate niche fragrances and fragrances that are sort of outside of the ordinary designer brands that were popular back in the day. And I think that's a very interesting and very exciting time for us as a brand, because people are open to exploring us and trying our fragrances. And so we definitely want to scale this business. We see it as a business that we want to leave behind as a legacy. It needs to be a global brand that's available in all parts of the world. And we're currently kind of working towards that. Obviously, still a very, very long way away from that, and a lot of work to be done before we become a truly global brand, although we are in 5 countries already. And we've started that journey. But there's a lot of things that need to be done for us to be a truly global brand, in terms of team, infrastructure, supply chain setup, distribution, and things like that. So we are working on that behind the scenes and setting that up. And we anticipate a lot of growth in the next few years. Having said that, there are a ton of new brands that are entering the market. There is a lot of competition. It's a very saturated market. And to find a point of difference is really, really difficult, because there's new brands every other day. And I'm sure you've seen it around, whether that's small startups, in the UK, and also internationally, there's loads of new brands coming out. And so it's about, how do you stay ahead of that? How do you navigate around that? And ensure that you remain relevant.
How do you do it?
For us, it's we are quite different, because we as a brand have our own retail presence. There's not a lot of retail brands that have their own retail presence in the way that we do. Most people sort of sell their fragrance in through distribution networks, and so that's kind of a point of difference for us in terms of providing that experience to the customer.
As a percentage, what would you say is it heavily geared towards that, or do you still have online channels? And
we have online channels, but retail is still definitely the bigger part of our business. So the way we sort of position our brand is, we are a London-based brand, and that's inspired by Arabia. So we take a London lens, a Western lens, into Arabian fragrances. And so how do we do that? We take sort of very strong, potent ingredients that are commonly used in the Middle East, and we tailor that to a slightly a Western audience in terms of the profile, how it's delivered, how it projects, etc. So I think it's about, how do we kind of push that and continue to drive that forward in terms of product development and maintaining our sort of brand identity. And also, how do we push the boundaries in terms of products? And we continue to do that in terms of whether that's fragrance concentration, fragrance quality, the perfume is behind the fragrance. We're always trying to push that. And it's about continuing to do that. And of course, there's no denying that creativity, marketing and branding plays a massive part to this as well. You know, being relevant, staying ahead of social media, both in terms of trends, but also content, producing the right content that resonates with our audience and appeals to our audience. So it's all of those things. Obviously, it's not easy because there are a lot of creative brands out there and a lot of people that are doing amazing jobs with amazing brands. But alhamdulillah, we see a steady growth in our business and people definitely like our products. And like I said earlier, you see that in the reviews. For me, it's all about customer feedback. What do the customer, it's not about what I say, it's not about, I can say something is amazing, but if my customers don't say it's amazing, it doesn't mean a lot. And so, we're seeing that interest grow in the brand, both on social media, on reviews, on sort of fragrance, in terms of in the fragrance world itself, both through people that are experienced in fragrance, they are slowly starting to pick up the Sunnamusk brand. And so hopefully we will see that growth continue, inshallah.
What would your advice be to people who are thinking about ambassadors and thinking about how, you align your brand with certain people? How did you think about it? It's
very difficult, to be honest. And that's probably why you realize we actually don't have an ambassador. That's because we kind of fall into this world where we don't want to be seen as a brand that's only for Muslims, but also we don't want to be seen associating with ambassadors that don't align with our values. So it's a very, very difficult balance to try and hit both of those audiences. And so we've been thinking long and hard about this, although we have some names in mind, which I probably won't disclose. Sure. But it is sort of challenging. And especially in this day and age where customers are very savvy, audiences are very savvy, they would criticize you in terms of who you associate with and who your sort of brand ambassadors are. It's important to choose the right people. And so we are still working on that. And hopefully I'd like to say in the next 2 years, we'd have a few brand ambassadors. We've been having conversations with people, but it's about hitting both of the sweet spot. It's quite difficult.
Because I guess more than any other business with luxury brands and like perfumes in particular, the ambassador means much more. Mm-hmm. It's not just
absolutely.
It's not just Gary Lineker selling crisps.
Yeah,
it's more than that. It's about you want to be that person. So 100%. They need to kind of embody your customer.
I mean, if you look at all the big brands, big fragrances, they all have ambassadors behind them. I mean, there's not a single one that of the big fragrances that doesn't have an ambassador. So yes, absolutely. And in terms of marketing and branding, how do you personify, how do you embody a fragrance? It's usually through a person, because you can't really, with clothing you can see a photo of it online or you can see videos, but with fragrance it's hard to kind of get that message across in terms of what is that fragrance and what does it embody. And I think doing it through ambassadors is definitely a very commonly used method. And we'd like to do that as well, but it's got to be the right person.
Yeah. Very interesting. Excited to learn who it is eventually. I wanted to ask you, where do you think most entrepreneurs go wrong? You've got, let's say you've got Ibrahim and Kazi. We've set up a stall outside Brick Lane, yeah, let's go Brick Lane. We're out there, we're hustling, we've got our itters on, we've got some of our dopies going there as well, and we're going for it. Let's say we've started there. Where do entrepreneurs go wrong in their journey?
I think
and I'm not saying, by the way, those guys are going wrong.
Yeah.
It's just that they've obviously not had the success yet of what you have.
Yeah, it's sort of limiting factors as well as a result of doing those mistakes. I guess a few things. I think vision is very important. I think clearly defining what your end goal is and objective is very, very important. And I find that a lot of people don't have that, especially startup entrepreneurs, in terms of what is the ultimate goal. Because yes, it's fine. I have long-term goals and short-term objectives and short-term goals. But it's all about the long term, because how does that feed into your roadmap in terms of trying to achieve that bigger goal? Because that puts it into perspective. Because if you're saying your goal is to open 1 stall or 2 stores or 3 stores, then you're obviously going to be working towards that. And that's going to sort of, I guess, slow your growth down if you want to grow. And if that's your objective, fine. But I'm saying if your objective is to obviously be a bit bigger business or to grow the brand or to scale the brand, then it's very important to articulate that in a plan, in a document, and then work backwards. And that would clearly give you a perspective in terms of roadmap and where you need to be. So I'd say, yeah, vision and having a clear objective and a brand strategy is very, very important. And not enough people have that. And then I definitely would say sort of trying to overthink and be a perfectionist. You know, that perfectionist trap of trying to get everything right is definitely where a lot of startup people that I speak to and say, I want to start this business, but I just haven't done it because X, Y, and Z hasn't been right. And I think you can get caught up in that. It's all about doing something that you feel is good enough for your customers, testing that, and then iterating it. So yeah, that would definitely be one of the factors that I'd say people go wrong.
Where do you think those who are copying Sunnamusk, let's say, why will they not win?
That's a very good point, actually. I think copying definitely sort of blocks innovation and creativity. When you try and copy someone or something or a brand, you're kind of always focused on what they're doing and not what you can do different for your customer. In an environment where it's very saturated, it's very highly competitive, you have to be very different. So for example, when we started our brand, we were selling oil-based fragrances. No one was doing that on a mainstream level. And so that sort of set us apart from other businesses. If we tried to copy everyone else and literally did the parfums that all the other mainstream brands are doing, everyone would be saying, why would we buy it from you? And so you've got to really think about how do you offer a USP to our customers, and copying sort of definitely takes you on the wrong path. We see a lot of brands that sort of take, for me, it's okay to take inspiration. I'm inspired by brands, and it's fine to be inspired by brands and admiring works of others, but to kind of copy it and to copy someone's model and their products is definitely, I'd say, it'll be detrimental to your growth. And yeah, I'd definitely say avoid copying in that literal sense.
You're the CEO of a company that is turning over 20 million. How many people do you have?
We have near 300 people.
300 people, yeah. Wow. Full time?
Yeah. Combination of full time and part time, yeah.
That's crazy. Are you ever amazed? You look back and you're like, wow.
Yeah, all the time. All the time. We have an annual dinner that we sort of have at the beginning of every year, and everyone comes together and we have a sort of good time, and we recognize all the people that have done exceptionally well in the year. When I sort of enter that room and I see all these people, and I look back to some of the days that we would only dream to be at that position. It's kind of truly, we're grateful, alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed us, and through obviously all the hard work, we see where we've come, and yeah, we are truly sort of grateful to our team that have sort of made this possible as well. But equally, we also see the vision. We see that, okay, we've been able to do this. So imagine what we can do in the next 5-10 years. So it's about being grateful, but also being hungry to do more as well.
Absolutely. And who are you? Who are the unsung heroes that you're thankful to for getting you where you are?
I'd definitely say some of my key team members. We have a guy called Stanley. He's our head of sales. He's put in countless amount of hours, literally dedicated his life to the last 3, 4, 5 years. And it's those few key people. There are other people in the head office that obviously I can't name them all, but they've put in countless amount of hours of work and really been there for the brand and us through times of difficulty. For example, during COVID times, that was a really difficult period for us, but there were a few key team members that really came together and helped us move forward. And it's those times where almost at times they show you strength, because as a result of seeing their strength and their resilience, you kind of also get motivated. You kind of motivate each other. At times you have to show your team resilience and motivation, and other times they show you resilience and motivation. You kind of, and I was also inspired by some of my team members at the time, and I see the effort and the work that they put in, and I was like, wow, you are willing to put that amount of work in for a brand that you work for and something that you're passionate about. And that can also be inspiring in reverse for me as well, and then you kind of feel it and see it as a responsibility for you to do even more for your team, so it kind of goes both ways. So yeah, definitely, my supply chain managers, some of the project managers, people have been really, really good to us and loyal to us. So yeah, definitely a lot of people that I can be thankful to. And of course, I'd say from a religious point of view, the du'as of my parents, I'd say have protected us in many situations. And I truly have belief in that. My mum is always making dua for us and giving that sort of moral support. If we ever have any issues, I might share it with my mum, and I might say, this is what we're going through, this is the difficulty that we're facing at the moment. And she'll say, I'll make dua for you guys, don't worry. And it's that having that comfort and that moral support sometimes can go a long way. But also I think, being together as brothers, we're 5 brothers, that can also be very, very helpful at times, Again, it's that moral support, even though they might not particularly get involved with the issues as such, but it's that, having that conversation and someone telling you that, what, it's fine. Like, it's not going to be a problem. Sometimes that is very, very important as an entrepreneur because it can get lonely and dark sometimes,
Abid, I guess this is a new question, but I've never really asked before, but like if you were to do a pre-mortem, looking back 10 years, we hope that it goes really, really well. But what are the risks that are lying in wait that you think if we're not careful about these risks, we won't achieve what we wanted to achieve?
I think it's as a startup, some of the foundations you don't sort of really prioritize and you don't really work on, whether that's governance, whether that's sort of compliance and sort of small things that can be overlooked but really, really important and detrimental when you become a bigger business. I think it's those things, making sure that we are, all the new territories that we go into, there's a lot of different regulations, there's a lot of different guidelines, there's a lot of different sort of compliance regulations that you have to work towards, and for us those are the risks that we want to sort of avoid, ensuring that we don't sort of run faster than we can and ensuring that the foundations of the business are strong. And it's difficult to get that right because you're always hungry to grow fast, but at the same time there's certain things that you need to do to ensure that the business is healthy, and so we are trying to sort of navigate around that.
Amazing. And Abid, final question is, someone's listened to this and hopefully been inspired and thought, yeah, you know what, I'm inspired by Abid and his story. What's your advice to him or her when they're just about to start their business?
I'd say definitely sort of take your time. In the early days, you've got to put a lot of work into the brand, the development of it. It's not I see a lot of people sort of wanting to businesses as a side hustle, and I think that's fine to a certain extent. Like, you can do that for a little while, but you've got to be ready to commit to it. This isn't a part-time thing. This isn't something that you can build on the side. You've got to give your heart, your soul, your passion, everything into it to build something from a very small startup to scaling it. It takes a lot of work, and you've got to be truly dedicated and ready to commit to put in those hours and that work in. But also you've got to be ready to be different. How are you different? And I always say this to people, don't just look at someone and say they've started it and that's why I'm going to start it. You've got to have independent thinking. Why am I going to do it in a different way? And I've kind of touched on this earlier. It's that having that USP. And so be different, but also be ready to commit, because it's not an easy journey for sure. So
Abid, alhamdulillah, you've had a lot of success. You're into your cars. You've got your 911 GT3. I'm not into my cars, so I need to write it down. And mashallah, 7 Series as well. So a lot of wealth, a lot of fame, and your position in society has changed, right? Somewhat, and you'll have felt it. How's that changed you? And what should people, who are not necessarily there but could be there, how should they, navigate it? I think it's quite easy to get caught up in it. So I, first of all, try and keep myself quite grounded and always remember
where I come from and what I had to do in order to get there. Because it's quite easy to get complacent and think, oh yeah, I'm comfortable, I'm this guy, and that quickly sort of bites you. And so it's very, very easy to get caught up in that. So first of all, try and to the best of my capabilities, try and stay as grounded as possible. So I try and sort of stay as grounded as possible, because it's quite easy for that to get to your head, and that kind of bites you. So it's very, very important to stay grounded, to stay humble, and we try and do that to the best of our capabilities. But I guess in a more positive way, having a social profile, having that reputation that you've built over the years can definitely help you with business. Networking, connecting with people, it's a lot easier. Some of the conversation that I have today, I could only dream of, 5-7 years back. And so I think it can definitely be very helpful and very beneficial in terms of your business and your growth. But also you have to be very careful that it doesn't get to your head. And you truly stay humble and you stay hungry, because yes, we've built a business that's, turning over a sizable amount of business, but there are people that are doing billions in pounds of business. And in that comparison, we're a small fish. So it's always very important to stay hungry and stay humble.
Jazakallah khair, Abid. I've learned a lot. And I pray that, inshallah, Sunnamusk goes from next level to next level.
I've got to learn more from you after this conversation, and I'm sure we're going to have many, many conversations.
Definitely.
But yeah, it was my pleasure for coming here today, and thank you for having me on. But yeah, I'm hoping you tried some of the fragrance. If you haven't,
we've got some. We've been given some as a gift.
Okay, amazing, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.